Mr. Rajiv Malhotra, fellow WPO and YPO members and spouses. Yeah, good evening and a warm welcome to all of you. At the outset, on behalf of WPO, I would like to thank Sri Rajiv Malhotra for accepting our invitation to address us today. Also, Amrit and I would like to thank all the WPO members and YPO members and their spouses who are here today for the WPO event. The WPO and YPO events are all about education and idea exchange. And education means the learning triangle. The learning triangle comprises of a teacher, the student, and the magic or the miracle of learning which passes between the teacher and the student. Today we have Mr. Rajiv Malhotra, who will educate us about India's unique paradigm and what it has to offer. A brief background about Mr. Rajiv Malhotra. Mr. Rajiv Malhotra is an Indian-American entrepreneur, philanthropist, community leader who has devoted himself to promoting a proper understanding of the Indic traditions in America for the last decade. After studying in Delhi at the St. Columbus High School and St. Stephen's College, Mr. Malhotra went to the US in 1971. He's been there for almost 40 years to pursue his graduate studies in physics and computer science. He has worked in many companies and then has also been an entrepreneur. I think he sold his company in 1994. And he has been on his own after starting the Infinity Foundation. He now works full-time with the Infinity Foundation, a non-profit organization in Princeton, New Jersey, which he founded in 1995 to foster harmony amongst the diverse cultures of the world. Mr. Malhotra's pluralistic outlook stems from his Hindu background. He's an active writer, columnist, and speaker on a variety of topics, including the tradition and cultures of India, the Indian diaspora, globalization, East-West relations. In short, we have a very eminent speaker who will share his vision with us today. I would like to now hand over the mic and the rest of the evening to Mr. Malhotra.
What a wonderful turnout. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. I'd like to say a few words about my work and then throw it open and invite a healthy, lively Q&A exchange. Since I started actually, it's very interesting that most of the invitations and most of the places I give talks in India tend to be academic places. So yesterday was IIT Chennai. I spoke in Delhi University, and they're going to make this book a textbook next year, book that I just came out with. Previously I've spoken at JNU, and tomorrow I'm going to University of Mumbai, and then Indian Institute of Sciences in Bangalore and IIM Bangalore. So it's been these kind of people, and but it's very interesting for me to speak to corporate people, because I get to reconnect with my life. Until 17 years ago, I was also a corporate person and management consultant and entrepreneur. So in a sense, it's like going back, and it's very exciting for me to address a group like this. Before I talk about my latest book, which is the topic for today, I also want to give you a little overview of some of the things I've done to give you a context. In this, since I started the foundation, we've picked a few, by experimenting with different ideas, we picked once in a while a theme and then gone with it for a while, and then another theme and so on. An example of a theme where we've made a mark, there are two examples I'll give you where we think we've made a mark in the study of Indian civilization. The first is in Indian models of psychology and mind. Usually in psychology departments, when they teach Western models of what is the mind, who is the self, what is the nature of problems, and they really don't recognize that India has any role to play. But actually, if you look at ancient Indian traditions, a huge amount has been written about the nature of the mind, which ironically, some of the cutting-edge Western models in neuroscience and cognitive science are based on studies of advanced meditators and yogis and ancient techniques. And next year I'm writing a book on Indian influences in modern American neuroscience and cognitive science. Actually, that is at the cutting edge of where it's at, but Indians themselves haven't recognized this. So around the year 2000, I got a grant proposal to give a grant to IIT Kharagpur. They were going to celebrate their 50th anniversary, and they were going to hold a bunch of little conferences, and they wanted us to sponsor one of them. And when I looked at the list of conferences, the one that attracted me was called Mind Science. And so I looked up, I asked them to send me the details, and I found that in the details, sure enough, all the speakers, while both Indian and Western speakers were talking only about Western ideas of mind. So I wrote back saying that I'd love to sponsor the conference on one condition, that out of all these panels, there should be at least one panel on Indian ideas of mind. And quickly I got this response that we're not chauvinists, we're scientists, we're very scientific, and so on. And this is bothersome because it presumed as if, that there is nothing scientific. So I contacted my white American friends who are very deep into these things. There is one in Cambridge University who translated Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, and he teaches as cognitive science. There's Robert Thurman, who's a prominent Buddhist, who teaches the neuroscientists of America about various theories of mind from the Buddhist point of view. So there's people who do chakra meditation, and they are looking at curing various diseases, and the National Institute of Mental Health in the US sponsors this research. Mayo Clinic sponsors this research. Harvard has this kind of research. So I got hold of these people and said, I'd like you to go and give a talk to Indians because maybe they'll believe you more. And so I came up with their proposals and their biodata, all from very famous places, and sent it to IIT Kharagpur, and they immediately accepted it. And when they gave these talks, they all got standing ovations. Very big, wow, this is great. We never knew this kind of stuff. So this launched a multi-year program on Indian psychology, and we started bringing these same guys back, and we had programs in Kerala, in academic university programs in Kerala, Chennai, Pondicherry. The one in Delhi was a major coup because they said if you can get in Delhi, because there's a big barrier to this kind of ideas. So the Indian approaches to psychology became well known, accepted within Indian academia over the past decade, and there is now an annual meeting held specifically to discuss Indian theories and Indian ideas of mind and psychology and cognitive science. And there's about 150 or so academic scholars that meet on a regular basis. And we sponsored many conferences of this sort, many individual scholars of this kind, the theory of consciousness and all that, which has become very fashionable in the West, and the Indian origins of that. I also found that a huge number of conferences in the US and Europe on this subject were originally, if you look in the early days, they would invite Indians to teach them. Then when they learned it, they started teaching the same thing and gradually phased the Indians out, and then gradually changed the terminology to things like the relaxation response or neurophenomenology. So if you were to look at what is the original term, you'd be quite surprised. But these are new terms because then you can get a patent or a copyright, or it looks good on your resume. It's partly for that because Americans, the system rewards originality, and it doesn't, many of them think they cannot go to the scientific establishment and ask for a grant which looks like they're taking some old Indian technique and validating it. They have to make it look like it's their own. So I've documented all that. In fact, a book will come out next year which is just on this particular issue. And then we funded a college textbook for Indian colleges, specifically on Indian ideas of mind and psychology. And that textbook is out, and there's about 15, 20 colleges which are teaching that. So that's an example of a field we've created from scratch, just by some courage and some insight, some vision that this can happen. Another example is history of Indian contributions to science and technology. When the history of science is taught, it's all Westerners, everything from who invented the test tube to who invented this, that. It's all, if you look at the index of science textbooks, it's all Western names, as if, nobody else did anything. But this is not true. And China has been recognized because there was a man in Cambridge called Joseph Needham, Joseph Needham loved China, and his life work was, he did 30 volumes on China's contributions to science and technology. There's a Needham Foundation, and Cambridge now publishes that, and every library, every center of China studies in the world has it as a reference series to understand Chinese as a rational scientific people, and not just some primitive people or mystical people, not some stereotypes. And so that series of books made a huge impact on the position of China in the world. So I felt that somebody should do that for India. And in the 90s, I decided that we will create an India series on science and technology in the Indian tradition. And I was so convinced that a lot of technocrats will join, IITs will join, but they didn't join, so I did it myself anyway. And one of the things I wanted to do is get it done in India by Indians, because there's a lot of Indian scholars. Why not? This way the knowledge stays here and more people keep doing research. And I also wanted an Indian publisher, I wanted Indian editors. And I was told by a well-known person in Harvard that you will never be able to succeed with Indians doing this work. You will never get done. Now I do know that it's very difficult. It took a lot of hardships, a lot of pushing, constantly managing, getting this done. But we have 9 volumes done on the history of Indian science and technology. And this talk is not on that, but if it were, I could give you a huge seminar on some of the very pioneering contributions. And I'm not talking about vague things written in some text. I'm talking about steel, where there's physical evidence that a certain steel exists from a certain period and nowhere else it exists at that period. I'm talking about certain textiles. I'm talking about certain, agriculture, certain medicines. So it's a series where each topic, each area of technology or science has a separate volume, and the authors generally are researchers in IIT. There's IIT Kanpur people, there's various people from prominent Indian universities. These are internationally known people, and every book goes for international peer review to make sure that it is accurate and checked out. And so that's the kind of impact we're trying to have. When the series is ready, for which we may need Indian sponsors, because we want people to get involved and excited about it. When the series is ready, we'd like libraries to have it, IITs to have it, teach courses on it. There is growing interest in teaching the history of Indian science, because now India realizes there's more confidence that we have a scientific mind. We do contribute. So why we contribute? We should understand our past. I was disappointed once to read statement by Narayan Murthy when he was asked, why are Indians so good in software? And he says, we thank the British because they taught us science and all these kind of things. I wish he had known that there is an old tradition of intellectual thinking, abstract thinking, analytical thinking, a huge tradition in mathematics in India, and I wish he had made a statement like that. So hopefully a series like this will change the next generation of leadership who will feel that their civilization has offered something. Now today's talk, the book I have just come out with called Being Different, is the result of having lived in the US for 40 years and also come to India 3-4 times a year, every single year. I haven't missed a year. So maybe there's a record of some sort, 40 years, never missed a year. And been very comfortable in both environments and watched the Westerner through the Indian eyes, which Indians observe these things. And when they read some of my observations, they say, yeah, I've also come across that. But they're not noticing it. They're not observing it systematically like a scholar would notice it. And, they're making casual observations of these points. So I worked in many capacities as a young student, and then as in the corporate world, and a senior executive with thousands of employees working for me, then as a management consultant, and then as an entrepreneur owning businesses, in fact, in many countries, from Poland, Czech Republic, France, England, Germany, US, Korea, and so on. One of the few countries I did not do business in was in India, because I had bad experiences with dealing with some corrupt officials, and I thought, I don't want to be here, I just walked out. But that's a different story. So dealing with Westerners in many capacities, and casually as friends, and always being very analytical about observing what's different about them, how the reaction is different. I would reach some conclusions, and then I would sort of try them out, test them out, and that's how I've evolved a whole theory of how Indians are different from Westerners by looking at Westerners. Normally, it's the other way around. The West has gazed at India. For 200-300 years, they've sent scholars, and they've looked at India in their framework. So they've sent anthropologists, social scientists, religious scholars, historians, and they've looked at India in a paradigm of the West and made us fit that. And that gives control. The person who owns the paradigm, if I put you into my paradigm, then I have some control because I understand you in my terms. And if you want to argue back, you have to argue in my paradigm, and it will not be as successful. So I'm trying to reverse that by understanding the West in our terms. So one of the things I discovered, noticed, started paying attention to early on, was that Westerners are not as comfortable at a huge amount of what they would call chaos. Indians more comfortable when things aren't quite, linear. Non-linear thinking, parallel thinking, improvising, uncertainty, ambiguity. It's okay. This is okay. That's okay too. May happen, not happen. So while for the Westerners, it's sort of like, is it this or is it that? Kind of yes, no. Give me a straight answer. Or you are lying. Yesterday you said this. Now you said that. Why aren't you straight? So I felt that this is a kind of a psychological conditioning that the two cultures have. Often I'd have a meeting. Let's say there's a meeting going on. There's several Indians and a few Westerners. The Indians are simultaneously having many conversations. So A is talking to B, C is talking to D, and E is talking to both A and B, and X is listening to these two and making some comment to himself or to somebody. So all sort of going on. And the Westerners sort of sitting very quiet and sort of wondering, what is this? Sort of very not able to sort of intervene or get involved. They're sitting quietly. Because participating in this sort of way is very discomforting. And then when the meeting's over, the Indians would leave everybody very clear what is decided. And then the Westerners would walk into me and say, I don't know what happened, what is going on, what are we supposed to do? So Indians have filtered out the parallel things and what works, where, fit this, over there, that thing, like that. So there's a certain mindset which we should understand. You see, when you meet a Japanese businessman, there is a very Japanese quality about him. And he's very sure of that. He's not very ashamed. There's a very strong Japanese quality about him. I remember the chairman of Sony being interviewed, and someone asked him, why your quality is so good? And he's not embarrassed or anything. He said it's because our girls, when they're raised, the art of their dance and the art of flower arrangement teaches them precision, beauty, love, care. This is part of our culture, the way of life. And so we put it in our products. What a nice thing to say. Yeah? So I would want to know Indian businessmen who go around can relate to, present their product in that manner. I would like that. Yeah? The Chinese, there's a very distinct Chineseness about them. They are not like the Americans. The Americans are not like the French. Russians are not like the English. They are very distinct. And while, yes, Friedman says flat world, and in certain ways it's merit-based, flat world, and the trade and all that stuff. But in terms of human behavior, to make the product, which is a standard flat product anywhere, but to make that product, the worker, the thinking of that worker, the person who's your partner in another culture, maybe a competitor, that psychology is very civilizationally distinct. It is so. And if you work enough and make observations, you can actually learn a lot about others that's distinct, and you can use it in your deals. I used it all of my life in my deals because if I had Polish people, I knew there's certain kind of a expected attitude. And French different from English. I could tell that, and I became better over a period of time. So this study of the other, the Europeans have done, and they call it area studies. The government sponsors this, the private sector sponsors it, so that it's good for their next generation to understand various regions of the world. We do not have in our universities study of this region, that country on our own terms. Even the post-colonial scholars who critique the West, they use Western theories to critique the West. They don't use our, what we call Siddhanta, which means theory, our way of looking, our worldview. They don't use our civilization's view to look at them. They look at them in their own view, which is not original. It's just a copy of what they have themselves critiqued. So I have been doing this for a while, and I used it in my own business as a tool in negotiating with people. The Chinese have developed this thesis that modernity is not exclusively a Western thing. When you ask an Indian, are you traditional or Western, he has to choose that I want the iPad and I want the phone, I want the modern stuff, so I can't be traditional. And therefore it's an either or choice. People are fortunately misinformed and they think that way. But the Chinese response is that I'm both. I'm Chinese and I'm modern. And there's a Chinese way of being modern, which has nothing to do with being Westernized. So I don't have to become Westernized to get modern benefits. I can be modern while retaining my Chinese thing. And they have started 100 Confucian institutes. Confucius was their major thinker, and this thought, called Confucian thought, is taught in Chinese universities and colleges and schools. And the first language they teach is Mandarin. English is mandatory as a second language, but not as the mother tongue. The first language is Chinese. So the identity is built from a young age is that I'm a Chinese. They have a strong sense of history. Everybody is taught a very proud idea of being Chinese. And they have come up with this idea of Confucian modernity. They started 100 of these Confucian institutes all over the world to teach that, project that. And they've become one of the top 3 or 4 destinations for foreign students to go. And when the foreign student gets a degree, they also get a certain dose of Confucian thought, the equivalent of what we call Westernization. It is the Chineseization. So they feel as a world power, they should also have their own unique civilizational projection. So this book is a critique of what I call Western universalism. Chinese are already critiquing it, as I just mentioned. Yeah. Now this idea of the Western discomfort with what they call chaos. And by the way, there's no Sanskrit translation for chaos. We don't have a word for it, because that experience is not the same experience as they've had. We have a lot of complexity, a lot more complexity in Indian thought, a lot more complex. Everything is more complex. And things are more simple in the Western thought, few things. This idea crystallized during the Kumbh Mela. I was in Haridwar attending the Kumbh Mela, and there was a crew from ABC Network in the US. They were there for a month, whole crew, to do a documentary about Kumbh Mela. So they were interviewing the leading Swami, who's got a lot of sadhus and all that. They wanted to get many people's opinion, what is this Kumbh Mela? And this Swami said, I was about to leave, my taxi was waiting. So he told them, you should also interview this guy. He comes from US, so you interview him, get his perspective on Kumbh Mela. So these guys come to me and say, can you just spend 5 minutes, we need your comment. And what was supposed to be a 5-minute comment, they wanted to continue discussing. We went on for 3 hours. And when they showed the program, it was mainly the discussion with me. That was what they showed. And what had struck them is this. They had a standard question they were asking everybody. They said, we've been here for a month. We still haven't figured it out. Because we asked everybody, what is the meaning of all this chaos? And everybody gives different answers. So we want to know, what do you say? So I said, the chaos is in your mind because it's cognitive overload. The amount of complexity and sensory input that you're getting is crashing your models. You have very simple models. The simple model can say this input, that input, this output. Scenario 1, 2, or 3, that sort of thing. And here you're getting a huge amount of different kind of overload and different kind of experience. So the chaos is in your mind, and this condition of not being able to make sense out of so much complexity is what you are calling chaos. So it is not that the chaos out there, the chaos inside you. So then I gave them a whole history of America, because I studied a lot about that, and the whole fear of chaos way back from ancient times in Western culture, what is the origin of it, and how this obsession for order has been an issue in Western history. So these people were very struck that there is this guy. He said, you are the first guy who actually problematized it as us, rather than because. And I said to them that you see all these guys walking around. Everybody is doing something. Somebody's bathing. Somebody's eating. But the individual doesn't think there's chaos. He's just doing his thing. And somebody else is doing something else. He's not bothered that I'm doing this and this guy is doing something else. It's okay. So this ability to accept what is and a huge amount of diversity is bewildering to the Western mind. And I must say that the Indians have picked up this Western sense of what is order and chaos. So we have the organized sector and the unorganized sector. So I, in this book, say that this so-called unorganized sector is actually self-organized. Because a little group is self-organized. They don't need instructions from somewhere. There is no hierarchy telling them what to do. There is no Kumbh Mela event manager. No event manager. No, there's no event manager. Nobody sends out invites. There's no program. There's no program. There's no headquarters of this is the headquarter and then, it's like they know from astrology, they know at this time it's going to happen, and a lot of communities, they show up, they put up their tent and they do their thing, and another community does their thing, and it's like a huge mela. And it just keeps happening for centuries, every 12 years. So it's sort of like self-organized. There is no control, nobody making a rule that you should do it. Nobody is asked to do it. So it happens. And this is the nature of a lot of Indian business also. There's a lot of Indian business, which is family business or Jati, little community, fisherman community. I lived in Nagapattinam after the tsunami to build some projects for them. And so I learned their behavior. So this idea is very strange for the Westerner, that people are able to make their own decisions and choices in a decentralized manner with no central instructions or authority to do so. And then I tell them that Indian music, they improvise. There's no written code, written notes. And they're amazed. I have some very good American musician friends. My son's in music, so when I talk to the musician friends, I tell them that, it's like you have an orchestra, they all have scores, but the maestro in Indian music is somebody who takes pride in the improvising, and he'll never repeat the same thing the same way. He'll make something up. And the Indian dance is improvised. And it's not like the standard, like a drill kind of thing. To the Indian dancer, that would look like a drill. So they find it very interesting. And I have a friend, and she wrote this book on Indian cooking back in the 70s. The first big hit book on Indian cooking. Now there's many. So I said to her, what's the secret? What made your book a hit? And she gave me some answers, but the real answer that came out of the discussion is that this is the first time Indian recipe was explained in a way that the Westerner would feel comfortable. So it was take so many ounces of this and heat it to so many temperatures for so many degrees, so many minutes. This kind of a thing. And so people felt comfortable because it had been turned into order. And so, but I tell my friends that, you cook out of this way, but you go to any Indian restaurant, if you go into the kitchen, no chef has got a weighing machine and looking at temperature and saying how long, how many degrees and all that. It's done through your feeling, So this is a very Indian quality, this quality. And it's not trivial. This is a quality I'm emphasizing over other qualities that are in this book, because I think this has got a huge potential for creativity, for presenting our uniqueness and distinctiveness, for understanding the other on our own terms, for seeing why he's anxious, for behaving like him when you want to. There are certain situations where you want to not be the Indian kind and be chaotic, but you want to be like him to make him comfortable because it's for yourself, it suits your situation. But you're doing it as a conscious acting job. You're aware that you're doing it. And you're not turning yourself over to somebody else, you're just doing it because in that moment it suits you. If you're reflecting on this difference all the time, you'll have an edge in controlling or keeping your own situation stable and, and understanding why the other guy is behaving this way. So this is one example of Indian distinctiveness, and it has its applications in decentralized management, self-organized systems, I have in this book, I've said that civilizations are forest civilizations or desert civilizations. And ours is a forest civilization. the West emerged in the desert, the Middle East desert. All the Abrahamic traditions emerged in the desert. In the forest, there's a lot of complexity. In the desert, there's only a few things. In the forest, there's a large amount of things. Like even if you look in a little place, there's so many insects, creatures, and there's so many trees and shrubs, and they are all intertwined. They're all interrelated. They're not separate. It's not this is sand and this is stone and whatnot. It's intertwined, complex, fluid. Next day it's different. Change is frequent. And so you have flux, change, uncertainty, complexity, interdependence. If you look at all these words, you find them in the forest. You don't find them in a desert where there's a few things and they're stable, static. You come next day, it's more or less similar. And so I've also metaphorically sort of said that a civilization that grows in such a geographical environment of complexity, it learns to deal with complexity. The mind is very complex. The mind is dealing with all these kind of relationships and ideas and so on. Whereas a civilization that for thousands of years emerges in very simple sort of geographical environment does not have the benefit of so many things that it knows, so many different complexities it knows. So the Indian mind is words within words within words. When you're talking to somebody, he's inside a story, he'll start telling you another story, and then within that he'll go off and tell you another story and so on. Now, I've so far explained the advantages, but there's also disadvantages to what I'm telling you. This idea can also be misused. The Indian quality can also become a problem. So the guy tells me, please come tomorrow, it'll be ready, and then tomorrow when I come, he'll say, Arey, come back tomorrow, you know. Or you know, you order 5 of something, he says, okay, 4 will do, or you know, you order. This sort of improvisation can be a problem. You cannot improvise in every sphere. So you don't want in the military a soldier who says, I'll improvise my own battle plan, I'll figure it out, you know. So this business of order is not a problem in every respect. Order is also a very great thing, a very great quality the West has. So when you look at our tradition, it's a balance between order and chaos in the Western sense. The story of the Samudra Manthan between opposing forces to create is on the cover of this book. We have the Devas on one side and the Asuras on the back side, and the spindle is on the spine of the book to metaphorize this idea of opposites cooperating, opposites in balance. Neither side is going to be eliminated. So in our attitude, we shouldn't say that we are chaotic. We can be comfortable in chaos. But ideally, we also have the ability to be very orderly. In fact, if you look at music, it is you don't start a neophyte who just wants to enter into music and tell him to play whatever it feels like. It'll be noise. It'll be random noise. He has to first go through rigorous training, very orderly training. He has to learn to repeat what the guru is teaching him. Similarly, in dance, you have to repeat, repeat, repeat. So very orderly, drill-like, rigorous training has to be the first step. Only when you mastered it, only when you mastered a very orderly way of doing something, only then are you allowed to go wild and free and improvise as beyond it. So this business of comfort with disorder and chaos should not mean that the person lacks rigor. That is not the idea. It has to be both of those balanced out. This is one point. Since it's time and I want you to interact more, I'll just give you one quick difference more and then we'll stop because there's many differences in the book and we could go on all night. The second difference I'll tell you is the attitude towards history. The Western civilization gives a huge importance to a literal historicity of things that have happened, without which they're not comfortable. So when they're teaching their tradition, it is a lot of very literal history, and this history is unique, and history is non-reproducible, and its history cannot be challenged or questioned. So I call this history-centric. This kind of a way of thinking is history-centric. Whereas in the Indian civilization, the highest truth is not contingent on history. History is there, itihas is there, it's a nice thing to have and good to learn, but you go to people and, the same stories, the same morals that you're learning from history, historical events, are also available in the present moment. And this, I won't get into details what's the philosophy behind this difference, but it has to do with the nature of the self. If the nature of the self is the one, what we call aham brahmasmi or tattvamasi, the one in everyone, then everyone has the potential to recover that. Everyone has the potential here and now to do their own process, whatever that process is, and recover it. And so there are many, many people in history with no final, no exclusivity, and there may be another one tomorrow. And therefore, if somebody comes to me and says, I'm from Latin America and we had this experience of God, it's okay for me. Yeah, probably did. Why not? So God as CEO is always available and is accessible. And it's not that he gave once he downloaded his manual to one person and said, this is the final download, and now everybody has to get it from him. And if you can't get it from him or don't believe that, then you have no access, you are gone. So it's not a linear chronological communications from CEO, which has stopped a long time ago, and therefore you better get it from the institution that has that software, that has a download copy, because it's the exclusive. And if you don't get it from them, then you can't get it from anywhere. We do not have that model. The model is that you can get your own download. You can have your own download. You can have your experience now, in other words. At least you have that potential. And even if 1 in a billion people will actually achieve it, the point is that every century there will be a few such people. So it will keep, new things will keep, there will be a revision update every once in a while. Because once in a while, some new guy will manage to click the right buttons and get the download. So there will be an updated version. So there's no finality of something very old that we have to fight over. So this, we do not have a release 1, release 2, release 3. Some people believe release 1 was final. Some say, okay, it was superseded by release 2, and we have to update release 1. And then some say that they were superseded by release 3, and there's a big war going on over that. We do not have that. So it is sort of, and there are philosophical, metaphysical concepts I've explained in this book, which have to do with the separation of Shruti and Smriti. And Shruti is that which is eternal, and Smriti is that which is constantly updated, revised. So we've never collapsed those into a single book and made it final. The Smritis keep getting updated, and therefore science has never had a fight in our civilization. We've never had a war against science, like in the West, the war of religion and science. We've never had this kind of a war, because science as a new discovery is welcome. And it may be right, it may be wrong, but you don't have a fight because somebody's challenging your old text, So this history centrism as a Western characteristic of access to truth has been a problem for Westerners, and they understand that. And many of my dialogue partners, I am doing my own Samudra Manthan with people from other faiths. I do so many conversations, debates, discussions with Catholic theologians, Protestant theologians, secularists, atheists, Marxists, Buddhists, like that I've been doing. In fact, when I go back, within the first week of December, I have a major debate with one of the most prominent Jesuit theologians. He's a Harvard professor, and he's endorsed at the back of my book, and he's read the whole manuscript a year ago, really likes this kind of discussion because it's good for both parties in a discussion like that. So it is not with any disrespect, but with complete respect that I'm talking about difference. To me, understanding difference is not about superiority. So if I order dosa, I don't want a pancake, I don't want them to say it's a pancake or a paratha or something. It's not disrespect for the other, it's just that they're different. Apple is not an orange, not better, worse, but it's different. So civilizations are different. And civilizations should understand that difference, should be able to talk to each other about themselves and how they see the other as in a relaxed manner. That's the point of this book, in order to explain what is distinct about Indianness so that Indians can be more comfortable about that. I'll stop and would love to take your questions. Thank you.
Idea of civilization. Okay, there's a current theme happening in India about civilization equal to religion. Okay, what are your views on this, especially on the note that you stopped last?
Good.
You know, right from Kudangulam atomic power project down to many things in India, this idea that civilization is equal to religion, and so whether it's the Catholic theme of many things or anything else, do you subscribe to this theory, or this Indian identity, whatever you've been speaking all through, is it really the Hindu identity, or is it something larger?
Yeah.
What is your idea of the Indian identity?
Okay.
Thank you.
So you've got several questions, but really one issue there. My view, and I have a lot to write in this book on that, written a lot of pages, whole chapter. First of all, Dharma should not be translated as religion. And I give a lot of reasons of distinction between Dharma and religion. A huge difference. And a huge mistake that the Westerners, when they came, they were looking for what is the religion of these people, and so they collapsed all this stuff. The Dharma is very different than the idea of religion. You do not need central authority. You can do it on your own. There is no one book. It keeps changing. The ultimate Dharma is called Swadharma, which means my personal Dharma. It's sort of like you have my documents and my websites in your computer. So you click and you get the list. So suppose you have a screen which says my Dharma, and then menu pops down and it says my ritual, my holidays, my deity, my philosophy, and in each of them there is many choices. So you can, in my ritual, you can click out of them, pick the one you want, and under my philosophy there's many kind of world views, and then like that. It's exceedingly, it's a palette. It's a palette on which you can paint and create a lot of diversity. So it is not fixed as the way religion is fixed, and nor is there a claim of exclusivity or superiority. So this is my Dharma, and that's your Dharma. We're comfortable. That's sort of an attitude. So I would first challenge the word religion in that context. The word for for civilization is Sanskriti, not Sanskrit, but Sanskriti. Sanskriti as in culture. And Sanskriti is acknowledged to exist in Southeast Asia. They have other languages. They have Thai language and Bahasa language, all these languages. But they acknowledge that Sanskriti is a common thing that pervades South Asia and Southeast Asia. So if you replace, I use the word civilization, I use the word Dharma in this book, and I make my own, but I explain in detail that I'm talking really about Sanskriti. Now when you talk about Sanskriti as a worldview, Sanskriti is non-exclusive because it does not believe in one history. And since there is no one history that is absolutely correct and all others must be falsified, for me to be valid, I must falsify your idea of history. That's not there. So therefore, there's multiple paths. You've had one idea of the past, so that's your path. It's fine with me. And mine is different. And we are both comfortable. I respect you, but I want you to respect me. It's that kind of an attitude. So when you have this sort of a Sanskriti, this kind of a fluidity, which the Westerner will call chaos. They often say that these guys, in fact, in the book, I have quoted that during the Cold War, the Americans, CIA, secret documents, and confidential correspondence about India, which is classified. There's a Professor Andrew Rotter, who's written a book on what American top people were thinking of India. Only a couple of people have written this book based on declassified CIA documents, and he makes the point that it really bothered all these people, Lyndon Johnson and the head of the CIA and all that Indians are so chaotic, even in their religions. They believe in too many things, and so you don't know which one is right. And you talk to one guy and you talk to the other guy, they'd have no certainty because everybody's got his own view. So this business, they thought, is anarchy, and such people are untrustworthy. This is the conclusion, that they would make an untrustworthy ally because they do not have certainty, which comes with monotheism, which comes with one account of history, and whether it is a right or wrong account, at least you have certainty. So what we consider comfort with all this diversity was considered by them as a sign of being sort of confused people. Yeah? So we must understand all this, how we've been seen and so on. So I think now Hindu is a recent term. Hindu is a recent term, and Hindutva is even more recent. And I do not consider the Indian, in this book, I will restrict myself to this book, I do not consider the Indian identity to be synonymous with any organized religion, any politicized religion. That is my view. Yeah? And as a cumulative Dharma, which keeps accumulating with more revelations, with more whatever, this is a very open source. Like I compare it with the internet. So you have your own website, and you have your own service provider, and this guy has his own, and this guy has his own, and it's okay. I don't have the reason to exclude others, throw them out. You see, the attitude of somebody else who is required to believe in exclusivity, who is required to believe in only one idea of history and falsifying all others, is very difficult to fit into this. So the problem comes that I'm saying, okay, we are all okay, you're okay, and I'm okay. Are you willing to agree with this? Are you willing to accept my deity? I'm willing to accept yours. Are you willing to accept mine? The issue probably comes depends on the other person's answer. And there are different people who will answer differently. So if they have a problem with my way of life, my idea of the divine, my idea of deity, my idea of the rituals, my philosophy, and not just, it's okay if they have a problem practicing it for themselves, because I'm not asking them to practice it. But if they have a problem, then I'm practicing it. In other words, if they are unhappy, that I'm practicing it. Yeah? While I'm not at all unhappy whatever they're practicing. But they're bothered that I'm practicing something else. And it is very important, and they feel obsessed, they have to falsify it. That creates tension. Then it's a question of what do I do? I mean, then that's an open question we have to think about. But the exclusivity claim is the real issue. And the exclusivity claim, origin of that is from history centrism. The main contribution of this book in that particular point, there are many points, but on that particular point, the main contribution I would say of this book is the diagnosis that there is a history centrism, which people in the West that I've talked to acknowledge and admit, some very directly and openly, and some after a certain amount of discussion, that is indeed the case. And that leads to religion, institutions, organization, exclusivity, and so on. And there's a whole history of several centuries of what the consequences of that can be. So I am hoping that doesn't infect India, because we've been a very open society.
There was a article that a chapter that was being taught years and years in Delhi University, the 300 Ramayanas. And there was a big hoo-ha about that, because somebody took objection, there shouldn't be 300. So, that kind of narrowing down of views, is that a quest for modernity?
So let me, this is a very intelligent question, and thoughts. I wanted someone to ask, you're the first one who's asked, so I'm really thankful. Because it's a modern, A.K. Ramanujan. My book quotes him with great praise. Because at this point, that Itihas is not history. Because Itihas is to be interpreted in your context. So you see in Cambodia, Ramayana. I was in Cambodia, they performed Ramayana. They have their own idea. In Indonesia, in Thailand, they have carved the whole Ramayana in so many places. Now in one place you will notice, if you guys have been to Thailand and seen these temples, there is Ravana at the gate. Ravana at the gate. Lot of gates they have Ravana. So you ask the guide, who's this? He'll say he was an Asura. He was Ravana. And you say, okay, now why is he at the gate? So they have extended Ramayana to be Buddhist compliant. So the story he told me is that this Ravana was a very bad guy, and they got all the Ramayana facts, right. But then he repented and said, I would like to be born again and do good. So he was born again to serve the Buddha and protect the Buddha. So this way, this is beautiful, because rather than killing the past, saying the old release 2.0 is no good because now we have release 3.0. rather than the Buddhists saying, exterminate, kill, throw those guys out, burn the books, kill those people who are believing in it, they incorporated it. They incorporated it and said, with respect. After all, they really respect all that. They teach Ramayana. So they said that everybody got more chance. There is no final life. You have more chance. So this guy was a very bad asura. So then he's born again to protect the Buddha because it's a Buddhist kingdom. It's a Buddhist story. So Ramayana is a Buddhist story. They brought Ramayana into Buddhist story. So now he's protector of Buddha. So in all the Buddhist temple, inside is Buddha, and in the gate is Ravana to protect him. This is an interesting view. So now Ramanujan has A.K. Ramanujan, he's in University of Chicago, brilliant scholar. I have not read all his 300 whatever he's talking about, and I have not, I'll be very honest, I have not read the particular passages that may be problematic for somebody. So I'm not commenting on anything specific. I'm merely saying that the general principle that Ramayana and all the Itihas have been interpreted and should be interpreted by a lot of people in how they want to, in bring it into their own life, bring it into a contemporary frame, is a wonderful and a very central dharmic idea. And if you want to replace this flexibility of Itihas with the idea of one linear story, then you have actually Semitized it. You have turned it into you have copied their standard of order and said, I'm going to be orderly like you, so you will appreciate me and recognize me. That's a complex, saying, I'll now be like you. See, this business of being like the British in our tradition has caused us a lot. The Victorians did not like any practices which had too much to do with the body, because body is sinful. Body is original sin causing. And so the bodily practices like tantra or anything which is too much to do with body was bad. So people like Ram Mohan Roy and many others after that, they tried to eliminate those from part of what became modern Hinduism. So Hinduism is a result of a reaction and a response to the West to sort of comply with some of their normative thinking and eliminate some of the other traditions. Whereas the true Dharma, which is why I do not want to mix up Dharma and religion, the true Dharma has been an open system. There are people who are monism, there are people who are monotheistic, like many Vaishnavites are, there are people who are polytheistic, there are people who do not fit any Western category. You cannot call them monotheism or polytheism, the categories just don't work. There's people who believe in male divinity, female divinity, binary, half male, half female, beyond all descriptions, nirgun, nirakar, beyond all descriptions, all of these are allowed. And so we're not obsessed with figuring out what's the one truth and then we got to ban everything else. I think you've touched on a very important point. The open architecture, I hope, remains like that. So we can absorb and assimilate in a non-violent, in a non-harming way, many, many ideas. And that's the strength, I think, of our civilization.
Wondering whether you can highlight the differences between India and China. I mean, I think, we talked about the economic model of China versus India, but there's also a cultural angle, I mean, I think there's a serious nationalistic view of, are Chinese more nationalistic than Indians, or?
Of course.
So, and where does that come from, and what is the cultural ethos there, or?
Well, China is not as not as decentralized with open architecture and self-organized many thinkers. It's very top-down. That's part of the communist thinking, and very homogeneous. One language. The Han Chinese Mandarin was not all of China. It's like if you were to take Punjabis who conquered everything and everybody made everybody Punjabi 1,000 years ago, then you'd have similar stuff, or Bengalis or whatever. We didn't do that. So somebody may invade, a king may invade to get taxes and get land, but he's not trying to convert them into his way of thinking. And even when Buddhism was exported, Buddhists never said, we'll appoint the viceroy and you pay taxes to us, even when we had the power to do so. And even when they acknowledged us as superior, even when one dynasty after another in Cambodia and in China and many places invited us as sort of the superior culture to teach them, and many Indians were there, mathematicians, astronomers, medicine people, professors in very prominent positions by invitation. There was never a move to militarize it, to extract money out of these people, to change their names to Indian names. No attempt to do that. No attempt to change their language to our language. It was like, we share ideas, what you want you can have, that sort of an attitude. Now, but within China, the attitude was different from the Han Chinese, and the whole mainland China is different from what has been left out. They have not been fully conquered. Taiwanese say we got Taiwanese language, not Mandarin. They don't have Mandarin language. Hong Kong's is Cantonese. Those are left out, undigested. There is a term called digestion of one civilization by another in this book, and I explain what that means. So the way pagans were digested into Christianity, the way Native Americans were conquered, the good things were taken in and made part of the West, and what they didn't need was left alone, and they're all, genocided for practical purposes culturally, and they have become a museum culture. So you go and you are admiring what a beautiful people they were and what they did and what not, but there's no living civilization left. That's what happens when a predator civilization eats and digests, and what he doesn't eat, he excretes and puts it in some place. So he becomes stronger, taking over the weaker civilization. So there's a whole concept of civilizations digesting others, and this has happened. The West has done a lot of that. So in India, we didn't have, regardless of any amount of violence, regardless of who did what, there was no attempt to go digest everybody and make them like yourself. That's why we have this diversity. But China, homogenized. Now, the advantage China has, we must understand, they have a kind of a forced unity upon themselves. So there's very little dissent, and 2 generations have been raised, brainwashed to think a certain way. The map of India, large parts of it, like someone was saying, are painted as part of China. Northeast and Kashmir, here, there. So these 2 generations don't know why an Indian is trying to be argumentative about it. Why are you claiming it? So to them it's incomprehensible that it's not part of China. And so not only Tibet, but well beyond Tibet. So this is when the current generation of Chinese leadership dies, the next generation will be very dangerous for India. Because the next generation has been raised on this cockiness that we are very strong, we are modern, we are equal to the West, we are ahead of the West, and we don't put up with anybody's nonsense, and they may become a very vicious lot for India to deal with. And I predict that China will become the biggest problem for India, and they may not necessarily fight us directly, they just put enough military to keep our military occupied at great expense. They have trillions of dollars saved, and we don't. We have a huge financial debt also. And the bad work, the hard-hitting work, they will outsource to Pakistan. So they'll use them to do all the dirty work and give them missiles and keep doing whatever, So this China-Pakistan axis is a very dangerous thing. And I'm actually writing a piece on what could be India's plan or US plan, because it will be a US problem also. So China versus India, culturally there are differences. India has the largest number of self-employed people. The street vendor, the guy who owns a truck or who runs a scooter, self-employed. Whereas in China you'll find that all the street vendors, they're employed by a big company. They're employees, like cash register employees, or all the taxi drivers in the city working for as employees. So they have huge employee-oriented state employees, and the number of people in India, workers, someone told me, the percent of Indian workers who are in a organized sector is less than 10%. 90% of the people are not in this organized sector. So either we got to appreciate it as self-organized and quit calling it organized. Unorganized. Yeah? Because there is some value in this. There is some independence and the original thinking and autonomy and somebody taking responsibility for themselves. So the culture and civilization is distinct. We must appreciate that, and we cannot wish this away. And there are advantages to this, there are disadvantages to this. So this is part of what I'm saying, reversing the gaze. And when I talk about this to our traditional gurus, they don't like they're talking about others. They say, truth is in my heart. Why do I need to worry about someone else? And then I have to remind them we have a Sanskrit word called Purva Paksha. Purva Paksha means studying the other. That's called Purva Paksha. So when I meet a Swami who says, I only worry about our tradition, why should I worry about understanding the West or understanding China? I tell him that when you study Vedanta, do you do Purva Paksha of the Buddhists? He says, of course, that's how we teach Vedanta. Because in those days the other was the Buddhist. So the different schools of Vedanta did Purv Paksha one another. They did Purv Paksha of Buddhism. Buddhism did Purv Paksha of the Vedantins. So this study of the other, a kind of a comparative philosophy and debate, is a very Indian thing. It's just that in modern times, people are lazy. They just haven't kept up with the Purv Paksha, because now we should be doing Purv Paksha of the West and the Purv Paksha of the Chinese, so we would understand them, and exactly the kind of question you raised, we should be raising, so our people understand these differences. I find that Indians of my generation at least are very uninformed about their distinctiveness, about their history, about their civilization, and about others also. And they have been told to avoid this question. It's an embarrassing question. It's an awkward. Don't talk about it. You know, there's a kind of a shame or ignorance, and so I find that Indians are not able to explain this sense of who they are. And I'll close with a remark, with an anecdote. In 2005, the Thai government, the Crown Princess, who's a Sanskrit scholar, wanted to inaugurate a college of Sanskrit, a Department of Sanskrit Studies in their university, and inaugurate a Journal of Sanskrit Studies. So they were looking for sponsorship for Indian government to bless them, because they thought India is the mother civilization. And the Indian government, ironically a BJP government, refused to have anything to do with it. They thought, oh, we're secular, we can't be seen as doing all this stuff. A very strange attitude. So a Delhi University professor called me. I was in the US, and he says, at least have a symbolic Indian presence. Please do something. So I said, we are a tiny foundation, we cannot do too much. So he says, put something in it. So at least we don't humiliate, because they'll feel very bad that India doesn't even acknowledge this as a part of. They think that Thai civilization founded on Sanskriti, and the Crown Princess starting this, and no Indian sponsorship. So my foundation gave them a sponsorship. So they were very happy. So they made all the arrangements and formalities, and the program showed that the Crown Princess and I would inaugurate and this and that. A month before the event, Mr. Murli Manohar Joshi, HRD Minister, announces he wants to come. Because now it's worth hijacking. Somebody has done all the work, a lot of publicity, it's become high profile, you know, so now it's safe. Now, without having done all the work I had done, they want to come. This is very unfortunate, I thought. So I said, it can't happen. How can you just kick me out because I'm a small-time person and you are a big shot? Can't be. So it was then a compromise was reached that all three would sit, the Crown Princess and I and HRD Minister would sit. And then there was a reception in the side by the Indian Embassy. A reception, cocktail, all that stuff. So I was meeting these young IFS people and I was asking them, I said, how much do you study Sanskriti when you are posted to ASEAN countries? And they were all looking at me surprised. They had no idea what I was talking about. So I said, do you know that like West thinks of Greece as the mother civilization, right? Mother civilization. And a lot of Wahhabis all over think of Saudi Arabia as sort of the mother civilization. A lot of these ASEAN, huge percent, consider India to be the mother civilization. And in your foreign policy and in your diplomacy, before you're posted here, don't they tell you all this? He says, sir, we are secular, we don't believe in all this. So this is the confused lot. This has nothing to do with secular. It has nothing to do with secular. In fact, in this book, I teach the Indian concept of Sapeksha Dharma, which means inclusiveness and pluralism of Dharma, as an alternative to secularism, which has created a lot of anxiety. I think a lot of problems and tensions in India are because of alien concepts that we have domesticated. And we have domesticated a lot of Western thought while doing mimicry. It's not only the adaptation of Hinduism to impress the West, certain things, but also importing of secularism and so on. We have categories of thought which we should re-examine and learn and be comfortable with them. In fact, Westerners are learning these things. I'm asked to give seminars not only on Indian ideas of cognitive science and neuroscience, but what can we do for pluralism in the West? Now they want to understand. I'm invited to teach Sapeksha Dharma idea in the West, as a new model of pluralism, which is not history-centric. It is not historically unique claim. So we can do that. I think I will close, and I want to thank each of you for, well, maybe more questions?
Thank you.
But, you have been giving talks all over the country. What do you expect the audience, I mean, what do you expect, let's say, corporate or business people to, what are your expectations?
Well, my expectations are just to inform people, make people aware. And if you would like, join us, participate. I have many projects. For instance, I'm putting these things into big books. Because a big book is needed to convince the most skeptical person with all the arguments and all the documents you have to. It's like a legal case you are fighting, you know. You have to go to the judge and he'll look at all the cases. So my books are argued like that. But I want help to turn this into smaller books. So a big 400 or 500 page book could be turned into many 50-page books. I need some help to do that. And because I'm busy writing the next set of books. And I also need them translated into other languages. We done one previous book I did, not this latest one, into Tamil, just came out 2 days ago. So I'd like people to see if they'd be interested in sponsoring this kind of work. And then this history of Indian science and technology. We've done 9 volumes. We have more volumes to do. We'd love to have a sponsor for a volume, 2 volumes, whatever. Then people can help us by taking these books, which are produced by commercial publishers like HarperCollins did my latest book, and they have a business model. They want to price it at a certain amount, and not everybody is going to afford it, and not every library or student is going to have it. And so there may be ways to sponsor where you take a large number and give them to a library or many libraries. And if we want a cheap paperback edition, Delhi University is prescribing this latest book in the psychology department, but they're calling a meeting of 150 universities to discuss this in January and see if they'd be interested. But they've told me right up front that a 600-page book is not going to be a big possibility for students. So if people want to sponsor if we can buy enough quantities, they will bring the price down to less than half, as low as 250 rupees instead of 600 rupees. So there's a lot of ways that we can use, including, I'm doing a lot of TV interviews. I just did one with a 2-hour interview with Mark Tully on his thoughts about this book, and very interesting thoughts. And I'm going to do with several people. I have some Marxists in Delhi University, and they've agreed we'll do a discussion, and I'll do one with Buddhists, and I'll do one with a Christian theologian in Harvard. So I would love to have a TV slot somewhere where we can show debates and discussions on what is Indianness, what are different approaches to Indianness, what is Sanskriti, how things are different, Dharma is different from religion. All these issues discussed and debated and conversed with people of diverse backgrounds. This would be very informative. But I do not have any presence in India. I'm basically thinker, writer, speaker. And when I come, if I'm fortunate enough to have an invite from a wonderful group of people like you, you're very attentive and very interested, I can tell, then I'm very happy to come and do that. But I do not have a PR firm or anybody, even one person in India who's a publicist who coordinates anything. So I could utilize help in many ways to spread this out more widely in India. That would be interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So truly our honor and pleasure to have you with us. It was really enlightening. I don't want to elaborate because truly I don't think I'm qualified. Your bandwidth that you showed, we grasped a few ounces of that, but I think I really admire the way you have gone about and presented with simplicity the theory of chaos or orderliness and civilization, dharma, ritual. So thank you so much for coming and spending the evening with us. With that said, I now request JK and Manju to come and give a small token of our appreciation to Rajiv. And I want to let you know that it was JK's idea to bring Rajiv. Thank you, JK, for making that happen. JK is also our WPO chair. So thank you.
I want.
Wow, what a brilliant event, sir. And it's equally fascinating to see such a lovely turnout. Hopefully, for the rest of the YPO events, we'll be able to see all of you and a few more. I want to re-emphasize that all WPOs are also invited to the YPO events this year, and do hope to see all of you all.